I am in the departments of History and WGSS, Women's and Gender Sexuality Studies. So I work primarily on South Asian history, which is the history of modern India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And I'm interested in the history broadly of gender and sexuality, and that's why I'm also in WGSS. So my training is as a historian, and I got interested in history because I wanted to know why things happened the way they did, or why our present looked the way it did. And so when I was in college, my first history class I took because we had a history requirement, and then I was totally hooked on college level or university level history classes. And it was only when I was a junior that I took my first class on South Asia and decided I wanted to go to grad school and work on this. My WGSS part came a lot later. I always saw myself as a feminist and an activist, but I didn't really know how to put that together with scholarship for a long time, and they seemed really separate. My research interest sort of moved into trying to think about how women were critical to ideas about nation and nationalism in modern India. And from there, it was just sort of like this whole opening up to this world to think about how we might reimagine it and how reimagining it from a feminist lens might look. Right now, I am writing a book about population and reproductive politics in India across the late 19th through to the mid-20th century, about why population or overpopulation, or fears or anxieties about overpopulation become sort of emerge in society at certain key moments across historical time periods, right? In other words, why do people in the 1920s all of a sudden start worrying that India's population is too big? It's not because population was actually growing very fast. So once you separate those two, and then you start saying, well, then why were they so worried? Why did this become a dominant way to explain a lot of social problems? And why did, in most cases, regulating women's reproduction become the answer to those problems? Teaching in both departments has been really good for me because it fits my work. But it also, I've really enjoyed meeting different groups of students. There is some overlap, like there are increasing numbers of folks who study both history and WGSS, and it's always a joy to have them in both my classes. I try to make my history classroom also an interdisciplinary place and encourage students who, for example, have a major in another field and want to think about how history and their other major can come together, for example, in a research paper. And history has given me a place to do that. I want to work with my students kind of cooperatively. I am far less interested, and I think I'm worse as a teacher when I think I'm just delivering information that I already have. So in that sense, I think in a very broad way, my research really connects up with my teaching, because my research is also a series of questions that I have that I want to figure out. I think the other way that is connected is that I also want my students engaged in research. I became interested in history out of a research project, like many of us, based on primary sources. What I loved about that project was I went in with questions and I found this great material that I thought gave me answers. My goal is for every student to have that kind of moment where they have a real question and there's ways they can answer them. And there's ways they can answer them that doesn't involve Googling something necessarily or looking it up in a textbook, but actually finding out what are the sources that are going to enable me to think through something that's really on my mind. So I try to build research into my undergraduate courses to the extent I can. One of my favorite was actually this course in History of the Family, where I asked everyone to write a family history of 3 generations, and it turned out to be, for me, one of the most exciting but also really moving experiences I've ever had as a teacher, because the students went in and did extraordinary research about looking at archival documents and then also oral history work with family members. And they didn't have to write about their own families. Some people didn't, some people did. And document the history of these 3 generations in ways that Some of them took their projects back to their grandparents and even great-grandparents to share as like telling the story of our family. It was the best group of papers I have ever read from an undergrad history class. And it was because they started from questions that they cared about. If I could do that in every class, that would be my goal. Like, what's the thing you really care about, and how can we turn that into a history research paper? What I really love about history is sort of not separable from just the way that I think about the world, which is I don't feel I can understand anything if I don't have a sense of what its historical context is. And what I love about being able to figure that out for myself is just the wealth of material that's out there and the number of people whose stories and lives are shaping changes in ways that are visible and not visible over time. And we can make them visible sometimes. For example, when I was writing this chapter that I'm currently working on, I have this material from the archives that I turned up, which are interviews with family planning workers in the 1960s. And they talk about how they go around rural India trying to spread birth control. I have a lot of these. But one of the folders in this sort of undiscovered, I don't know if anyone's ever looked at this, was a woman who, instead of just recording her experiences, actually recorded the experiences of women who she worked with, who were and all of them were not literate. None of them have probably been preserved in any other way in the historical record. But I happened to be lucky, and I happened to find it, and she happened to have gathered it for me. And so it's moments like that when you can actually learn something and discover something new about the past, and it might lead you to ask all kinds of new questions, both about what happened in 1965 when she's writing, but also about how we might ask about our present. So I think that's what sort of keeps me going. It's my way of understanding the world. It's my way of contributing to other people's understanding of it. So I think one of the best things about being a history major here at OSU is we have a huge faculty who teach about just about anything you might want to learn about. So it's an opportunity to come in here and study things that you may not have encountered, students may not have encountered in a high school classroom, about different parts of the world or different time periods, but also different methods of doing history, of encountering not just a political narrative of change, but we have folks who work in social history and cultural history. There's folks who look at material objects and archaeology. So there's just such a wide range of what you can do here. And I think, based on what I know of my colleagues and myself, if there is something that you want to know about that's not in a course, I think many of us are willing to take it on with you, whether that's a research project in a class, whether it's something you pursue in a 2800 course, or do an independent study or a senior thesis on. A lot of colleges offer this as well, but I think OSU's size here is where, we sort of really stand out because we can do all of those things. I also want to find a way to reach out to students who have, whose experience with high school or History Channel or whatever other ways they've been exposed to history has left them feeling alienated and left out of historical narratives. I talked to a student today who really felt that very strongly, who never saw herself reflected in a history curriculum that she had ever studied. As faculty, I think we have a responsibility to make it that every student in our classroom can feel that this history has a connection to them.